This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker, Syndicated columnist and author John Hood, NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, and political consultant Doug Raymond. Welcome to this week's show. On this program, we will discuss election laws back in federal court, an interesting analysis of North Carolina's electorate, and how rural counties can provide needed classrooms. Plus, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. The 2013 election law changes have sparked lawsuits and controversy, and this past Tuesday, the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals heard oral arguments regarding voter ID, early voting restrictions, and other aspects of the law. Chris, the court accelerated the review of this case because of the implications for November's election. Is there any speculation they might rule in sufficient time to change things prior to that time?
I actually talked to some of the lawyers over there, and I think there is a lot of speculation that they might rule in the matter of weeks and not months. And then the question will be, if they uphold the law, there's no question. If they strike it down, then the question is, can the state appeal in time to the Supreme Court and get some sort of stay? I think the likely scenario would be if the Fourth Circuit overturned this law, we'd have to go back to the previous law while the case was being appealed to the Supreme Court. And you can never predict these things, but judging by some of the questions that were asked, I think there are some people who are really wondering if the Fourth Circuit is going to overturn this law.
All right, Dennis, you're the lawyer on the panel tonight. The appeal is of a decision that U.S. District Court Judge Thomas Schroeder issued 2 months ago that said the plaintiffs had failed to demonstrate that the law disadvantaged minority voters. What do the plaintiffs need to do this time in order to demonstrate to the Court of Appeals that they should overturn that decision?
Well, I think the standard will be a little different, though, Tom, because I think that was about whether or not to institute or instate an injunction on that case when the election was coming up. But I think the standard will be pretty much the same. It'll be some re-arguments that they had before. But I'm like Chris, just listening to their tone of this the holding yesterday, that they may be changing.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if you listen to Judge Schroeder's questioning and his tone of voice back in April before he ruled, you got the very distinct impression he was going to uphold the law. You listen to the questions at the Court of Appeals. One of them said that they felt like that there was some obvious question about the way that the law was passed. The other felt like that the law was obviously very skewed, very discriminatory. Did you get the feeling from listening to their comments, Doug, that they might be ruling to overturn this law?
Yeah, I think anybody there's some problems in it, and I'm not a lawyer. I mean, Dennis might be giving us a little bit more insight, but it seems to me that there are some things that are glaring problems, and so I don't know if they can make a fix on a portion of it. But if you want my take, the voter ID thing, I think it holds up. I mean, you look at the amount of cases where
15 other states have it.
Yeah, and there was hardly any grievances filed this time, the first time it was in place. I think the thing about same-day registration and voting, I think that's kind of up in the air. The one that I went against my Republican friends, and I've said from the beginning was a bad idea, was to not allow people to cast a provisional ballot at a place that wasn't their polling place. The Republicans put it in because the Democrats were well organized, and they'd go round up a bus of people and they'd say, we're just going to take you to this one place because it's quicker and you can put in a provisional ballot. But who it hurts is people that have been traditionally voting in an early voting location, and they put that in their mind, that's their polling place. They went on election day and they said, this isn't your polling place, it's back across town. And they just went home, and there's no statistics on how many people there were.
But those issues are off the table, aren't they, John? Didn't the Supreme Court initially rule in favor of being able to keep the same-day voting and the shortened voting period? But then later the courts came back and said, no, they have to allow same-day voting and
These issues are all going to be live in the long run because all these cases are still live. Here's the bottom line on all of this. We have done voter ID now Other states have done it more often. We have had an elimination of the out-of-precinct balloting. Lots of other states never had it. There is no significant effect on voter participation. There just isn't. Now, same-day voter registration is a little bit of a different story. On that one, you probably do affect turnout a little bit. But on these other items, they've been extensively studied. In North Carolina, we now have practical evidence on the ground that shows there is no racial disparity that we can detect, and there's no significant effect on turnout anyway. That's what Schroeder's decision was about. It was about the facts. The questions from the panel in the Fourth Circuit were not about the facts. They were about their guesses at intentions. That's where where the argument is going, unfortunately.
And Tom, one of the fascinating things to me about this, when you talk about voter ID, can you imagine as a conservative, if I was talking about this and say, well, we know that African Americans and Hispanics don't have driver's license. I mean, can you imagine me saying that? But that's the argument that they're almost
heard that.
That's the argument that they're almost making is that this discriminates against these groups because they're less likely to have IDs. I just don't get it.
Tom, if I were to guess, I'm like Doug. I think Doug is right. I think that the courts probably will uphold the ID portion of this issue because you can cast a provisional in that situation if you can show some sort of impediment, a reasonable impediment to get a ballot. I think the courts will uphold that. I do think they'll focus on these other issues, and the one that I think that may come under suspicion the most is the one where they can't vote on.
So I want to go back to this, Chris. What do the plaintiffs have to prove in order to be able to get the court to overturn Judge Schroeder?
Well, it depends on who you ask, I think. I mean, does this have a disproportionate impact on minority voters? I mean, some of the questions, another question was, why did they take out, for example, somebody with a public assistance card? Why was that not allowed to be a voter ID? They didn't ask this, but why is a state university ID issued by the state of North Carolina not allowed to be an ID? Why did Tom Apodaca first have a much narrower bill, and when the Voting Rights Act was gutted, say, oh, now we can do the full bill, let's put everything in there? What was the intention of that? One justice asked about that. And I don't actually agree. We haven't had a huge record of how we've done in voter IDs. We've only had a couple of elections, one election. I don't think you can draw conclusions. There's all sorts of outliers. I don't think that is settled. I think intent is going to, whether it should be or not, I think intent is going to be a big part of this decision.
One way or another, John, isn't this verdict going to be appealed?
Yes.
Isn't this going to the Supreme Court?
Yes, absolutely.
So even if they issue a verdict prior to the November elections, isn't it very likely that that verdict will not be allowed to stand? Somebody will try to get an injunction?
Someone will try, yes, but you know, we've got a court that's evenly split in Washington. But
remember, we got 4-4 now on the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, with Justice Scalia's death, it's going to really throw a real monkey wrench in the whole process about what they can get done at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, and of course, if it's a tie court, then it just reverts back to the Court of Appeals decision.
That is correct.
So whatever this Circuit Court of Appeals rules could end up ruling today.
That's correct.
Well, we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate for the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. After these messages, we're going to be breaking down the electorate.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
They're considered guest work. Baseball players from other countries are considered guest workers here. Baseball, the previous administration and Congress cut a deal in 2006 allowing foreign players to travel freely across the country. Not so for agriculture guest workers. They're vilified for doing work Americans won't, and they face a mountain of red tape just to get here. Shouldn't American agriculture get the same consideration as baseball? Farm Bureau and Agriculture, we keep North Carolina growing.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees.
Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
North Carolina has 6.5 million registered voters. Catawba College political science professor Michael Bitzer recently published an analysis of the age, party affiliation, and where these voters live. He reports that 20% of the voters live in Mecklenburg and Wake County, while 54% of the total registered voters reside in just 19 counties. 40%, he says, are registered Democrats, 30% Republicans, and 29% unaffiliated voters. Baby boomers between 51 and 71 years of age account for 34% of the voters. Millennials, those under 35, are 29%, while those between 36 and 51 represent 25%. Doug, let's start with the data showing that 20% of the voters reside in Wake and Mecklenburg County, 54% in just 19 of our 100 counties. As a political consultant, what do these numbers say about how you would conduct a statewide campaign?
Well, first of all, Professor Bitzer did a great job of doing that, and it really is fascinating to look at. But in general, in a statewide campaign, you may not have known that specific, but you kind of knew that. But the key to all of this is not just the registration, but the turnout. And that's the key. You go to Mecklenburg County and you spend so much time there, yes, because the voters are there, but if you're not doing something to motivate them in the turnout, and that's the key to all of this is turnout, 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 because I've never seen an election that I've been involved in statewide where we look at a certain county and say, wow, we never expected that county to vote that way, but I have seen it where they've said, why didn't they turn out? We were expecting them to turn out better. So to me, it's more about turnout, and that's the key from a consultant's point of view.
I want to talk about that in a few minutes. Dennis, we've got this big urban-rural divide in North Carolina. We've known about it, and it's been growing for a number of years. Democrats tend to do better in larger cities where the population is typically more young. The Republicans do better in the rural areas. What are the Republicans going to need to do in order to be able to capture statewide races this year?
Well, they're going to have to, what Doug said, they're going to have to really, have a big turnout.
Well, what's going to prompt that turnout?
Well, they're going to have to get their base all energized. They're going to have to get people energized to go to the polls one way or another. And I think once they do that, they seem to do well in North Carolina on a statewide basis. If Democrats stay home, so the Democrats have got to energize their base, so that could also hurt. So it's one of those things where the base that shows up and the base that's energized is going to win.
We've talked about that before on the show, John, in that there are an awful lot of voters that don't like either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. There is some speculation some may just stay home or just vote down ballot. What are the Democrats going to have to do to prevail in North Carolina?
Well, this is very close to the median state politically. In other words, if you ask people which party to identify with, Democrats or Republicans, which major political party, all around the country, North Carolina's answers put it right smack dab in the middle of the country. It used to be Ohio, it used to be other states. People thought of Missouri as the median state. Now it's North Carolina. What that means is that in a state like North Carolina, you cannot win by turning out your base. It's not enough. You have to turn out your base, and you have to do well with the unaffiliated and swing voters who are soft E's or soft R's. That's where the race, in my opinion, will be won. I think both sides will be motivated. Generally speaking, I think they'll turn out. I think McCrory and Cooper, I think the Richard Burr versus Deborah Ross, I think these statewide races are going to be determined by pulling those swing voters in. They are going to vote. A lot of them are going to vote this year.
All right, let's talk about that, Chris. Donald Trump is one of the most polarizing political figures I think we've ever seen since any of us got out of diapers. So far as it goes, John just said that in order to win, Republican candidates, or any candidates, are going to have to move a little more to the middle, get a little bit more moderate. So does that mean that Republican statewide candidates are going to be running as far away from Donald Trump as they can during this election?
Well, some of them I think will. I think there's a big split about how they're going to deal with Donald Trump, not just in North Carolina, but around the country. I mean, it's worth noting that Governor McCrory couldn't find the time to go to the Donald Trump rally in Greensboro, but he did go to a private fundraiser with Donald Trump to raise money. And obviously, Roy Cooper didn't go to Hillary Clinton's rally this past week in Raleigh, neither did Deborah Ross. I think Trump throws a lot of this calculus out the window because there are a lot of Republicans who are very unhappy with Donald Trump. I don't think they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but I don't think they're going to vote, and they might not vote in the presidential race. They might vote for the Libertarian candidate. I think you'll see a little bit of that on the Democratic side, but not nearly as much.
Doug, we've said before that this is the year of the angry white male. These are the primary supporters that have fueled Donald Trump throughout the course of this political season. Let's put this in North Carolina. We know that many of them reside in the rural parts of our state. Will they show up on November 8th, and in what kind of numbers do you predict?
I think they will, but you know, where you started this discussion, we go back, we were talking about Charlotte and Raleigh. How many times have we talked on this program or privately with people, you can't win statewide without the East, and that's not Charlotte and Raleigh. So that's the number one thing, you still got to get that. But with Trump's numbers and Hillary Clinton, this is something we've never seen before. And I was just talking with John about this earlier. I think the interesting thing is I think the Republicans who are not pleased with Trump eventually are just going to say, you know what? I don't like it, but I've got to do it. I think the Bernie Sanders people don't have, they're mostly young, they don't have the habit of voting. I think it's going to be the Bernie Sanders people that are not going to go along with Hillary, not the anti-Trump.
All right, let's change this focus just a little bit. We are going to be a battleground state for the U.S. Senate. Deborah Ross, Richard Burr. There's going to be tons of money coming in here, lots of TV ads. It's going to be bloody. We've got a gubernatorial contest that should be very contentious and very competitive. We've got a treasurer's office. We've got an attorney general's office. Are these races sufficient to be able to motivate voters to come to the polls?
Well, you know, Tom, for a long time, North Carolina would vote red in the federal elections, and then they'd vote blue in the state elections, and then that all changed. I really think that it's all going to depend on the top of the ticket. I think what happens with the presidential candidates in this state are going to dictate what happens down ballot. I think it'll impact every race you just mentioned. And I think it will determine what North Carolina will look like after that election.
All right, final question in this topic. I want to put everybody on the spot, and we'll go around the horn. Since 1980, the average voter turnout in presidential contest years has been 65%. Now, we had a low of 59% in 96 and 2000. We had a high of 68% in 2012 and 70% in 28, the Obama phenomenon. Based on where we are right now, 20 weeks out, I want you to tell me what is your prediction so far as the voting percentage turnout, John Hood?
I will say I think it's going to be about average.
65%?
Give or take. I don't think it's going to be 2008 levels.
All right. Dennis?
I'm going to say 67. That was a good year.
Are you picking wine, or are you just choosing?
I won't say what I'm picking, but it was a good year.
It's like that game where you want the one step higher, just a little bit higher. I think it's going to be a tad short of the Obama numbers, because I think Trump is doing something very similar that President Obama did. He is motivating a group of people that you couldn't count on in the past to come out. They're going to come out. I'd say 68, 69.
68, all right.
I think it'll be about the average too, actually, 65, 66. Although I do think there's a chance that, if Trump is, if this is close, obviously, I think Trump will motivate people to vote against him who are scared to death of him having the nuclear codes. So I think the turnout could be higher, but I still will go with 65 or 66.
I am going to put these guesstimates in a Duke's mayonnaise jar, by the way.
That's the only mayonnaise you're allowed to use.
Under the house, and I will bring them out on November 10th, and we will talk about them again. After we take this break, we're going to come back and ask, how do you build rural schools?
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Closed, a sign you're seeing too often, especially on abandoned grocery stores and markets. When these stores close, we all lose. We lose the healthy North Carolina grown fresh produce, and our farmers lose local outlets to sell what they grow. The Healthy Corner Store Initiative can change this by providing resources to local small store owners so they can stock and sell fresh fruits and vegetables. Find out how you can get involved at ncallianceforhealth.org.
You only get one pair of eyes. Keeping them healthy is critical to your quality of life. Members of the NC Optometric Society know this. These highly skilled doctors have the latest technology and the medical training to care for your eyes and the eyes of those you love. Make sure you visit your optometrist for an eye exam on a regular basis. For more information on keeping your eyes healthy or to find the right optometrist for you, visit nceyes.org. Remember, healthy eyes, healthier lives.
There's more good news in our North Carolina forecast as our children's education improves. Under Governor McCrory's leadership, North Carolina teachers enjoyed the largest teacher pay raise in the country. And most important, since Pat McCrory has been governor, teachers' pay has increased 10%, more than $2,100 a year. Our education barometer continues to go up with Pat McCrory as governor. That means clear nights and sunny days. Higher teacher pay raises, improved education. That's your forecast.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
In public education, the state pays for teachers, instructional materials, and school buses, while the local boards of education are primarily responsible for providing classroom buildings. This is a highly problematic situation, especially in rural areas where the tax base isn't sufficient to build new schools. These schools now have the authority to lease buildings instead of having to finance them and own them, but a bill currently in the legislature would allow local school systems to use state funds earmarked for substitute teachers, custodians, and clerical staff to help offset the cost of the leases. State Treasurer Janet Cowell has been vocal in opposing Senate Bill 544. Dennis, you served in both the legislature and on the State Board of Education. Rural schools are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in supplying the facilities they need to teach children. What's your take on this bill now being considered?
Well, they are caught between a rock and a hard place, and it's not a very comfortable place to be because the rural counties need help on this issue. You know, for decades, Tom, when your father was in the legislature and mine was in the legislature, the state paid for operations and this local paid for brick and mortars. That's the way it always has been, and we've observed that, and it's worked out well for us fiscally. But this has all gotten blurred with the economic development being really slow in our rural counties. They cannot have a tax base to support building of schools. So they're having to look for alternative methods. I would say this, Janet Cowell, State Treasurer, has raised some valid concerns. But so the other side has some great points as well. I think if I were the counseling the legislature would be for them to go slow on this, put it off to the long session, study it during the interim, and try to come up with a solution because it's a very important issue.
All right, Doug, let's put this stool down on its own legs. You live in one of the poorer counties, you don't, but you live in one of the poorer counties. Older buildings require a lot of money to be spent on maintenance. Without exorbitantly raising the property tax rates, how are these rural counties supposed to build schools or get classrooms?
I don't know, because here's the scenario. Whether it's local funds, state funds, federal funds, those all come from the same place. That's all taxpayer dollars, and your only choice is either to raise taxes or reduce spending someplace else. And I'm going to tell you, unless I am unfamiliar with the pay of janitors and substitute teachers, I don't think that money is going to pay for very many buildings.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely. Building on North Carolina's medical home model, better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees.
Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
Health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
Whenever you viewers see us around, any of us around, you always tell us that your favorite part of the show is this coming one, in which we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, I'll start with you.
Well, interestingly, the Republican Party hired a new communications director this past week, Cammie Mueller, who has had a series of jobs. One of the things that came out is that she was highly critical of Donald Trump before she took the job, which puts her in an untenable position. I'm more interested in where she worked before, which is trying to trying to pass Amendment 1, not to have same-sex marriage in North Carolina. She worked on for the NC Values Coalition. In those roles, she said things like adoption by male two men who are married would be scarily rampant. She said it would be terrible if kids are taught that homosexuality is normal. I'm not sure this is a direction the Republican Party wants to go in an era when we're so divided on issues like HB2. I don't think it helps them.
All right, Doug Raymond, tell us something we don't know.
The North Carolina Association of Educators are losing membership fast as any state in the union. Over the past 5 years, down 47%. A lot of people are trying to figure out why. Maybe some of it is that there are some teachers that don't like their political, but something happened a few years in the legislature that really affected it. The Republican legislature included as part of teachers' benefits legal insurance for teachers in case they were sued on the job. That was a huge selling point for the teachers' unions that they don't have anymore, and it's costing them big time in membership.
Interesting. Dennis Wicker, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, when I was Lieutenant Governor, we started a program at Cherry Hospital called DART, Drug Alcohol Recovery Treatment. You know why? Because we found out it costs less money to treat them than it did to let them sit there and do nothing. It's worked very well. Why is this important? Because if we don't get treatment for these people, when they go to leave prison, they're going to be right back in the prison at taxpayer costs.
Interesting. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, over the first 11 months of this fiscal year, North Carolina state budget general fund has run a $1.2 billion surplus, bigger than anybody would have expected. People talk about the tax revenue, but that's not the main issue. $1 billion of that is less spending than authorized.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read my weekly column, visit our website, NC Spin, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.